The unspoken burden. In the remote sun-baked barrio of San Miguel, death was usually treated with a quiet, respectful solemnity. Candles were lit, prayers were chanted, and neighbors gathered to share food and comfort the grieving. But when old Miguel fell critically ill in his isolated house near the mountain trail, a palpable, terrifying panic gripped the elders of the village. They knew that Miguel was not an ordinary man. For decades, it was whispered that he carried an ancient generational curse, a heavy, malevolent spirit passed down through his bloodline. The ancient laws of the Western Visayas were absolute. A person carrying this curse could not truly die until they looked a living relative in the eye and passed the burden on to them. If they died alone, without transferring the curse, the earth would reject their flesh. Keep the doors locked, old Alinjuana warned the young people gathering at the village square, her eyes darting toward the dark silhouette of the hills. If Miguel draws his last breath without passing the burden, he will not stay in his grave. He will rise and he will look for the living. Among the listeners was Ramon, Miguel's estranged nephew. Ramon was a modern, pragmatic young man who had no patience for what he considered backward ghost stories. He refused to visit his dying uncle, believing the old man's illness was purely medical, and ignored the frantic pleas of the elders to perform the traditional ritual of release. 3 days later, Miguel died entirely alone. The elders, terrified of what was to come, insisted on burying him immediately, wrapping his wooden coffin in heavy iron chains and burying it deep within the rocky soil at the edge of the jungle. For 48 hours, a suffocating, unnatural silence hung over the barrio. Then came the sounds in the dead of night. It wasn't a sound the villagers were accustomed to hearing. It wasn't the stealthy creep of a thief or the heavy prowl of a stray animal. It was a rhythmic, incredibly heavy thud. 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 It sounded like massive solid logs being dropped onto the dirt road, moving with a bizarre mechanical regularity. One night, a local farmer named Cardo was fixing a broken fence on his property under the pale light of a fading moon. As he reached into his tool bag, the temperature around him suddenly plummeted, turning his breath into a faint mist in the humid air. He looked toward the road and froze, his heart dropping into his stomach. A figure was emerging from the shadows of the banana trees. It was Miguel, but he was horrifyingly changed. His skin was a mottled, bruised shade of gray, stretched tightly over his gaunt bones. His clothes were torn and caked in fresh graveyard dirt. But the most terrifying part was the way he moved. His knees and hips were completely locked, stiff as stone. He moved by swinging his entire lower body forward in violent, rigid jumps, his heavy boots smashing into the earth with a terrifying force. His eyes were wide open, milky white and bloodshot, staring straight ahead with an insatiable, mindless hunger. Within days of rising from the grave, the Amalanhing turned the quiet barrio into a hunting ground. The creature was driven by a singular, unholy instinct. It needed to find its living relatives and claim their warmth to fuel its unnatural existence. First, a local watchman encountered the monster near the rice fields. Terrified, the man tried to outrun the creature in a straight line down the main dirt road. It was a fatal mistake. Though the Amalanhing was stiff-jointed, its massive, rigid leaps covered ground with terrifying speed, easily overtaking the man and draining the life from his body. But the entity's primary target remained unfulfilled. The heavy, rhythmic thud, thud, thud began to draw closer to Ramon's house each night, echoing through the dark cocoa groves. The chase in the dark. On a moonless Thursday, the terror finally breached Ramon's defenses. He woke up to the sound of his heavy wooden front door splintering open with a violent, rhythmic crash. Looking down the hallway, Ramon saw the monstrous, decayed form of his uncle leaping into the house, his rigid arms outstretched, his gray fingers ending in jagged, dirt-caked nails. Panic exploding in his chest, Ramon realized the elders had been right all along. He bolted out of the back window into the pitch-black night, sprinting blindly toward the jungle. Behind him, the heavy thud, thud, thud followed instantly. The creature didn't tire, its pale eyes locked onto the heat of Ramon's living body, gaining ground through the brush with every terrifying, synchronized leap of its stone-like legs. As Ramon ran, his lungs burning and his strength fading, he remembered the desperate advice old Alinjuana had shouted to the village before the terror began. The Amalanhing is made of stone and clay. Its joints cannot bend. You cannot outrun its speed, but you can outsmart its form. Ramon made a sharp, sudden pivot, veering hard to the left into a thick grove of bamboo. Behind him, a loud, crashing sound echoed as the Amalanhing, unable to turn its rigid body quickly, slammed face first into a massive mango tree, shattering the bark. Realizing the monster's weakness, Ramon began to run in a frantic, wild zigzag pattern through the trees. Each time the creature made a massive leap forward, Ramon would throw himself to the side. The monster would overshoot, its stiff legs forcing it to stop completely, clumsily repositioning its entire torso before it could leap again. But Ramon knew he couldn't keep this up until dawn. His legs were cramping, and the creature was beginning to adapt, shortening its leaps to better track his erratic movements. He needed a permanent escape, and he needed it before his strength completely failed. Ahead, through the thick foliage, Ramon heard the low, rushing roar of the San Miguel River. It was a fast-moving, deep channel of mountain water, cutting through a rocky ravine. With a final desperate burst of adrenaline, Ramon sprinted toward the edge of the riverbank. Behind him, the Amalanhing let out a dry, rattling hiss, its heavy boots tearing up the dirt as it made one final massive leap to intercept him. Ramon launched himself off the muddy ledge, diving headfirst into the deep, churning water. The Amalanhing landed heavily on the bank just a split second later. Driven by its mindless curse, the creature didn't hesitate. It launched its rigid body directly into the river after him. The moment the monster hit the water, the ancient curse met its end. Because its joints were locked like stone, the Amalanhing could not swim, float, or tread water. It sank to the rocky bottom of the riverbed like a block of heavy concrete, the powerful, rushing mountain current immediately trapping its stiff limbs against the boulders. Ramon pulled himself onto the opposite bank, gasping for air as he watched the water. Beneath the churning surface, the milky eyes of the monster stared up at him one last time. As the pure, moving river water washed over the desecrated flesh, the dark magic of the curse dissolved. The rigid body of Miguel finally relaxed, his stiff muscles softening as the current swept his remains down toward the open sea, finally granting him the peace of the grave. When the sun rose over San Miguel the following morning, the oppressive weight that had hung over the barrio was completely lifted. The roads were quiet, and the heavy, rhythmic thudding in the night was gone for good. Ramon returned to the village a changed man, no longer mocking the ancient wisdom of his people. Today the house of old Miguel sits abandoned, a hollow ruin slowly being reclaimed by the wild Visayan jungle. The elders still tell the story of the stiff-legged hunter to the younger generation, reminding them to always honor the old rituals of the dead. And if you ever find yourself walking through the dark hills of Panay at night, and you hear a heavy mechanical thudding coming up behind you, remember to never run straight, because some curses can only be broken when you force them to turn. Please subscribe and like the video to support the channel. Thank you.